What's going on, football fans? It's me, J.R. Clark, back again with another Pound for Pound ATL. Joined as always by my main man, Jonathan Holder. Jonathan, what's going on, brother?
Man, had a wonderful July 4th. Looking forward to getting out of town this weekend. Getting to sit on the beach for a couple days. It's gonna be nice, and yeah, we'll be just a little bit closer to training camp, and yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, no, like 100%. Like this past holiday, which obviously is the reason why we didn't go live on July 4th itself. Figured there's everybody's going to be hanging out with their family, doing like firework type stuff and or what have you. Um, so we figured we would just record a video with you going out of town, on Friday. So this should be one of the last interruptions, I would think, um,
Yeah,
for at least for a while. With it being summertime, I don't know if any of y'all like really know, but my wife is a teacher, so obviously she has summers off. So that entails us being a little socially busier than we normally are.
hmm
Because she's off, so it's like let's do things, which is great.
yeah,
Right. I told her years ago that, if she wanted to have social fun, then she was going to have to be in charge of it. Because left to my own devices, I'll sit in front of this computer, reading football stuff and things of that nature until the cows come home. And since we don't have cows, it will be a very long time.
yep,
So, what brought us together today is we are continuing the journey of the USS ATL. Last time we left off with the USS ATL, it had just cleared the inner ring of the NFC South, uh, got through that asteroid belt, and came out the NFC South champs. Now, obviously, this is a scenario. There are many other scenarios that we can come up with, but in this scenario, we are plotting a course of what will be the Falcons making it to the Super Bowl.
yep.
So, the first obstacle to clear obviously was the NFC South. We outlined that last week, the strengths and weaknesses of our division opponents. And so this week, we're going to move out into the NFC at large,
Yep.
I guess you could say. So, our task really was to determine who are the biggest threat, right? Like
Yep.
who stands in the way of us making it to the Super Bowl, representing the NFC in the Super Bowl. Uh, so that was interesting to try to sit down and identify. We obviously don't spend as much time poring over other teams as we do the Falcons, but this exercise gives us a real good reason to pour over other teams. Um, so
Yep.
with that being said, like what was the team that initially stuck out to you, Jonathan, about like who you think we might meet in a like divisional round or what? Yeah, divisional round. It goes what divisional, then well, it's
Well, so
wild
it's
card,
wild card, divisional,
divisional,
and
and
then it's
then
the championship games, and then the Super Bowl.
so let's say we played the wild card. Let's say we played the first weekend.
Okay.
Uh, so
I mean, so if we're playing the first weekend, I don't expect us to be play potentially. I mean, anything could happen, and we'll just preface this by this is all just we're looking at who we believe is going to be where they're going to be. The top tier of the NFC. Everybody has their ideas about, and most people are going to agree on like the very top end.
right,
Um, and but there are some crazy things that can happen.
of course, yeah,
I think the obviously I don't think we're gonna probably see San Francisco in a wild card round. I don't think actually no, we you very well could because now you only have the one bye week, right?
right.
One person has a bye week. So, whoever there's a good chance that we won't probably see San Francisco or Philadelphia. Those are kind of the two top tier teams I would personally say from the NFC, and uh, you know, and on top of that, even if whichever one of those two teams doesn't get the bye, then I think the other one will be a high enough rank that I don't think that we're going to be a low enough rank that we're going to face them week one of the playoffs.
Right.
Okay, so that's my thought there. As far as who I think it would be a potential divisional round or a wild card round matchup would be, I mean, it'd be like your Giants,
Hmm.
your Vikings, Detroit Lions, potentially a divisional foe as well. Like if some, if whether that's New Orleans or Carolina, I don't really see Tampa Bay really having a shot, though. Weirder things have happened. But I think of the other teams in our division that could show up again, you could see definitely. I could see New Orleans.
Right.
And I could see the Panthers, though. We'll see how the offense gels. Defense, I'm not too worried about on them as far as from a perspective of will they be good or not. I think their defense will probably be good. Their offense, yeah, we'll see. Uh, but yeah, so it could be any one of those teams. Of those, I don't want to see New Orleans. I don't want to see Carolina in a wild card scenario. I really don't, because even if we, let's just say perfect scenario, we sweep our division this year, we win
Right.
every game. If we do that, that means we'll have beaten whatever team we play twice. It is
Highly unlikely.
immeasurably hard to beat a single team in the
Three
same
times. Yep.
year 3 times. It's just really hard.
Yep.
So I would rather that not happen. Now, if we go the other way around and we lose 2 games to this team, then maybe that changes my tune. But but if what I think could happen does happen, where we sweep it, I don't want to see another team like that for a third time in the year. So, I mean, I honestly think that the teams we'd be looking at would probably be the Lions, the Giants, the potentially the Vikings. Though, again, I think the Vikings. If we look at last year, that they had a great record, but a lot of their wins, and I don't have the number right in front of me, but a lot of their wins came off of like last drive wins, off of one score wins. Like they were very, 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 very narrow margins for error last year. So a regression for them back to the mean, I could absolutely see that being the case. And so those are the teams I think we're looking at from a wild card round is Detroit Lions. And so, let's go with the Detroit Lions. If we look at them, okay, they had a pretty good offseason.
Yeah.
They had the same. If we look at PFF, they're giving them the same grade as they gave us, and I feel we had a pretty good offseason. Sounds like they had a pretty good offseason. They had some losses. They lost DJ Chark, obviously.
Right.
Jamal Williams, Deshaun Elliott, Mike Hughes, another obviously because we have him now. But they picked up some good free agents here. They picked up Marvin Jones Jr. They picked up CJG, Gardner Johnson, Cam
Yeah.
Sutton, David
Yeah.
Montgomery.
They improved their secondary quite a bit, which is defensively was their weakest link.
Yep,
Which is really funny for us getting excited about our secondary when 2 of our acquisitions was on the Lions. And
yep,
something that, I try to remind myself, even though we feel like Jeff Okuda um, is a player on the rise, they didn't feel good enough about him to keep it,
yep,
which is, always interesting when you do an exercise such as this and you look at, a player that went from one team to your team, and you have to decide whether that's a good or a bad thing. Um,
yep.
then they
And
also go ahead.
but and it goes both, like that particular scenario can be, but can end up both ways. Like you could have guys that were doing great on other teams. An example of a guy that we currently have on our team, John Smith, great in Tennessee, moved over to New England, just didn't happen.
Right.
And then you have other places where guys start out like they just don't quite find their footing for whatever reason in a location. They move somewhere else, and either the light clicks on in their head, or there's some coaching aspect that is being given to them in this new location, that allows them to flourish where they
Right.
wouldn't have before for whatever reason. It could just
Yeah.
for whatever reason they just didn't mesh. So I think Jeff Okuda is going to be a better guy than what he was in Detroit. Mike Hughes, we'll see how that. As long as he's a depth piece potentially, then I think we're a okay on that.
Right.
But yeah, so they lost some guys. They got some more guys in. They have bolstered their secondary. Um, they and then when it comes to the draft, I mean, Jahmyr Gibbs, Jack Campbell, kind of a surprise in round one, but he's a good backer. Sam Laporta, highly touted tight end. Brian Branch was a guy that we were looking at, thought the Falcons might pick up.
Right.
The other safety at Alabama that we that we thought we were going to take instead of
Yeah.
the one we
Right.
got. And they also picked up Hendon Hooker. So I don't think he's going to be a factor this season at all.
No, he's still recovering, and
Yeah,
plus, I think he's more of an insurance package for Jared Goff. Like in a lot of ways, Jared Goff is a much more expensive version of what we're dealing with down here with Desmond Ritter. He's a guy that they're not 100% sure about. Played very well in the scheme that Brian Johnson, I believe, is their OC, put forth for him to play with. So they feel good about him, but not good enough to where they didn't take a young potential or younger potentially project quarterback, in
yeah,
the draft. So they kind of find themselves in an interesting position. They have a lot of hype coming into this offseason. They seem to be one of the off-season darlings of a lot of like outlets. And um, I have to say that not Jack Campbell, Dan Campbell, the head coach, has definitely like proved me wrong, at least initially, when he first got hired from tight end assistant head coach down here with New Orleans and got hired. I was like, what is Detroit doing? This guy's like at best, this guy's a meathead.
yeah,
But he seems to be a great like facilitator as far
mhm,
as like getting the right coaches in the right position, bringing a toughness culture to the Lions.
yeah,
So yeah, they've been an interesting one to watch, and one that I think could definitely be a stumbling block early in the playoffs.
yeah. The biggest thing with Dan Campbell is potentially. I'm not saying he will or won't, but at least from an outward perspective, like what we see on from an optics side of things, he reminds me a lot of Dan Quinn.
Right.
Very much like looking for that next catchphrase, but also preaching the toughness and all this other stuff. And like early on, Dan Quinn, a lot of the moves he made, coaching staff wise, a lot of some of it didn't seem like it was like, what are you doing? But then it all
Mhm.
just kind of worked out early on. When things started unraveling, is when things, either they were just, it felt like they were just kind of like, we need to do something. And then they
Right.
did something just to do something.
Yeah, yeah. They
Um,
freaking brought in Dirk Cutter back. Like, oh
yep.
God.
Yeah, that was a bad, I was not happy with that.
No, not at all.
But like I said, now Dan Campbell can absolutely be the best version of that
Right.
for Detroit, and I hope they are, because I would like to see that fan base be able to have something, whether that's a Super Bowl win in the in the near future or not, but just being relevant,
Yep.
not being that the doormat, the punching bag of all the jokes. I would like for them to not have to have that for a good bit.
Yeah.
Just have fun watching football, enjoy rooting for your team. You never know what's going to happen any given Sunday, kind of deal. Well, Detroit for the last ever, it feels like there's never been that any given Sunday for them.
Yeah, but I say outside of the Barry Sanders days, maybe there for a little while with they've mirrored the Falcons a lot. In a sense, like you had a superstar wide receiver and a hot shot quarterback, but you never could put it together to get a deep run or a
Yeah,
consistent run. But yeah, so before we turn this into the Lion show, but I think that they're one of the like major uh like hurdles early on in the playoffs, because I
Yep.
do think that they're a team that is good enough to get to the playoffs.
Yes.
Another team that I think is on that same level as the Lions, that we might see like in the divisional round, is the Seattle Seahawks.
Oh yeah.
They like Geno Smith had like a revolutionary, maybe not revolutionary, but like a resurgence last year. Had a career breakout year 7, 8 years into the league, which generally doesn't happen. Geno Smith is what we were hoping Mariota was going to be, in a sense,
Yeah.
in a lot of ways. Now, Smith earned himself a decent little contract in the offseason, but it's essentially a 1 year deal, 1 year, hey, can you keep it going type thing. He did fade down the stretch, threw a lot of turnover worthy throws
Yep.
that didn't get picked off. So the thing is, like, is he going to be able to, um, right that ship? Um, but
Yep.
they did some things in the offseason. They brought in a guy that we were wanting in Dermont Jones,
Yep.
to shore up that defensive line. We know how much Pete Carroll loves a stout defensive line. They brought back franchise favorite Bobby Wagner,
Yep.
who was one of the lone bright spots on the Rams last year. So he hadn't slipped yet. They brought in Devin Bush and Jaron Reed, decent role players there. Evan Brown, and one of the better centers. They upgraded there. He recorded the sixth best pass blocking efficiency at the position
Yep.
in 2021 for Detroit. So now, when you get into the draft, they had two first round picks.
Yep.
Devin Witherspoon, who's a guy that we thought if he was on the board when we picked at 8, that he might have been in the mix. So they get another like outstanding corner. They get Jackson Smith and Jigba, probably the best route runner as far as
Hmm.
wide receivers go. They get to pair him with Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf for another, weapon for DJ or for Geno Smith just to distribute the ball to.
Well, and
Um,
that and Lockett's been battling some injuries the
right.
last couple of years, so he's also 31. So this is a heir apparent in training kind of deals.
hmm
So
Now, last year they drafted Kenneth Walker, which if we were going to take a running back high last year, he was a guy who I was pretty excited about. And they did something that was kind of interesting, but we know how much, Pete Carroll wants to run the ball. They drafted Zach Charbonnet out of UCLA.
hmm.
And in round 7, they drafted Kenny McIntosh out of Georgia.
Yep.
So now they have a three-headed running back monster up there that should allow for a lot of versatility to go
Yep.
along with, the wide receiver group. It really should just be Geno Smith having to distribute the ball on offense.
Yeah,
Um,
Kenny McIntosh was a guy that I even after we got Bijan, that was a guy that I would have liked to have picked up in the late rounds,
oh yeah,
like in the seventh, if we'd have had the opportunity to. But yeah, that's a pretty stout backfield they got.
exactly. And so, the biggest question mark hinges on, what Geno Smith you get. But um, they were a much more surprising team last year than what many people expected. And I believe that Pete Carroll is going to have that defense, right back in the mix with the added additions of Draymond Jones and Devin Bush and getting Bobby Wagner back. Um, some of the young moves that they had made last year, adding that to some of the like edge rushers like Derek Hall out of Auburn and Mike Morris out of Michigan,
Yep.
along with Cameron Young out of Mississippi State. They've added some young talent to that D line as well. So I really expected their defense to be right back in the mix of causing trouble and being like a contender, especially like
Yep.
on the divisional round or wild card like level. If we're using that as tiers, I think the wild card, the biggest tiers there are the Lions and the Seahawks.
Yep.
So keep this thing right on a moving. Getting into what would be like the divisional round. So we make it through whoever we have to face, Seattle or uh, Detroit, and we make it to the divisional round. And I could easily see the divisional round being the San Francisco 49ers.
Yeah.
Uh, them or like the Cowboys, I think is that next tier. Uh, but I really want to focus more on San Francisco.
And the only reason why I would put San Francisco there, and I think you'll probably agree with this. The only reason I would put San Francisco there right now is the question marks at quarterback, like
Exactly.
exactly who's going to be it. And, when Brock Purdy does come back, is he going to be the same Brock Purdy from last year?
Right.
The guy just came out of nowhere. Is that going to be the norm, or was that an outlier? Who knows?
Right. Was it, hey, we don't have enough tape on this guy to really pick up his tendencies yet. And let's just be honest, whether we want to admit it or not, like one of the best play callers in the league, and definitely on the NFC side, is Kyle Shanahan. And he does a really good job of making it very easy for his quarterbacks.
Yep.
I mean, we saw what he was able to do in 2016 here with the talent that he had, produced like a historic offense. So you
Yeah.
take that same type of play calling, that like almost savant level play calling, and it doesn't, not that it doesn't matter what the talent is, but it definitely elevates the talent that you have, as you then see like Brock Purdy, but it's not just Brock Purdy. I mean, if Trey Lance actually comes in and like puts forth the talent that got him to be the third overall pick, which got San Francisco to jump us in that draft. I don't care what anybody says. You don't go up any further than you have to. And, they had, pretty good feeling that if Trey Lance was on the board, we were going to take him. So they jumped us to get Trey Lance for reasons. You know what I'm saying? For like talent, whether he's showed it so far or not, I still think that there is, and by all reports, he's looked very good, um, in the early part of their off season. So it'll be interesting to see like how that shakes out for them.
Yeah,
Uh,
the biggest problem with him is, like, we heard a lot of the same stuff last year. Like, even in the lead up to training camp, they talked about in the OTAs. Dude looked super crisp. Was throwing some crazy passes, all this other stuff. Got into training camp, and early training camp was like, this guy's unbelievable. He's like, just the amount of talent that's just on display is crazy. As you started getting a little closer, and then especially once you got into the preseason games and the lights were on and the live bullets were out there, didn't like what we saw on the field didn't match up
right,
to what we heard about in training camp and in the OTAs. None of that, like, the expectations were here, and then what we saw on the field was here. And it just the so it'll be interesting to see if we hear some of the, obviously we're hearing some of the same stuff where he's looking good right now. Does that then translate into preseason at the very least, and then into the regular season if he makes it that far and wins that job while Brock Purdy's still coming back?
and then the wild card in a sense is Sam Darnold. Like Sam Darnold, coming out of college, was a highly touted quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't really get that great of a shake per se with the Jets and then with the Panthers. So you take a guy who actually has some talent and you put him in the hands of Kyle Shanahan, like that might be like something that we are that the league necessarily isn't ready for, so to speak. I'm
Yep.
not saying that Kyle Shanahan can work wonders where nobody else could, but it could be a style that meshes better with what the skills that Darnold has. So the quarterback situation for San Francisco is going to be very interesting. And the only reason why we put him in where we put him is because even with the quarterback situation, they were really close to going to the Super Bowl last
Yes.
year. Now the other like deal is like, okay, Steve Wilkes. new DC. Can he keep that that defense that D'Amico Ryans had humming and Robert Slahy had humming before him? Can he keep that defense rolling? Everything that we've seen from Wilkes suggests that he can.
Yeah.
You know, so that's the only other real question mark.
Yeah, they now, unlike maybe some other places where you lose your DC to a head coaching position, you bring in another good DC or whatever, or just a different DC. He's not going to have quite the same level of talent that Ryan's had, or Salah before him. I mean, they lost uh, uh, Ebicom, they lost Mosley, they lost Jimmy Ward, Amenahu. They lost some guys that were highly like top 10 free agency guys. So they lost 5 guys off of that defense from last year. So now on the flip side of that, they got the guy that I really wanted. I was hoping we were going to go for, but I understand why we didn't, because that would have blown a big chunk of our free agency money. But man, I would have loved. And that is Javon Hargrave. They got him
Right.
in.
Yeah, they brought in
You
him. They
you
brought in
plug him in with some of the existing guys, and that's gonna make a difference. So can they be back to what they were last year? They can. Do I think that'll necessarily be like day one? They're right back. I think we probably won't see where they're at fully until probably anywhere from 6 to 8, 9 weeks into the season. So
right, and it'll be interesting if they get that rolling and they get the QB thing settled. I really do feel like they'll be right back in the playoffs and possibly in a divisional round. Now, the other divisional round that we talked about, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on them just because I don't like them. But that's the Cowboys down there in Dallas. Now, you got Micah Parsons, probably one of the best defensive players in the league right now. Dan Quinn has definitely like reinvigorated himself down there in Dallas to a point where he's gotten some head coaching interviews, is elected to stay, which is a boon for Dallas. But here's the kicker to me is you let Kellen Moore go and Mike McCarthy takes over play calling. That doesn't, if I'm a Dallas fan, that does not fill me with a ton of confidence.
no.
Um, like he hasn't shown really that he's learned much from his time in Green Bay. And if you're not evolving with the game, you'll quickly pass you by. We have seen that time and time again with a number of different coaches.
Yeah.
So as far as like the additions, they lost Amari Cooper. They're relying on CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup, and Brandon Cooks as their wide receiving core. So, can Dak Prescott elevate that group? Can Dak Prescott not throw as many interceptions as he did last year?
Yeah.
They have not brought back Ezekiel Elliott. They're going with Tony Pollard, and they brought in another running back that I'm blanking on his name.
Let's see.
But either way, they haven't made a ton of moves really. See, I'm trying to pull up. I know it's like somebody's screaming at their TV right now
I
or
know.
their computer. Like it's this guy, you moron. And
Yeah, I
I'm
know.
like it's okay, I'll get it.
Well, okay, a couple of things they did bring in. They brought in Jonathan Hankins, defensive tackle, Dante Fowler. Let's see, Ronald Jones.
That's it. I knew it was some. Okay, but to cap that off, what they did in free agency wasn't like super inspiring.
Mm-hmm.
They brought in Ronald Jones, Chuma our guy Chuma Adoga, Edoga,
Yeah,
uh,
Idoga.
Edoga, Brandon Cooks, and Stephon Gilmore. That was their off-season moves.
Yeah,
Stephon
they
Gilmore,
they
obviously,
they
you know,
re-signed Vander Esch.
yeah, they brought back Van Der Esch. They let um, there was another guy. Anyway, but the big deal is like they let Dalton Schultz go. They let him walk in free agency, and
Yeah,
then sign or then draft Luke Schoonemacher out of Michigan, who wasn't one of the higher touted tight ends. Maze Smith, the DT out of Michigan, is
hmm
who they drafted in the first round. Like with Nolan Smith and Michael Mayer still available on the board.
oh yeah,
So, and like you said, they brought in Hankins, so you have that's two like run stuffing DTs. So it's just kind of interesting. They did bring in DeMarvin Overshone, who fits a Dan Quinn sideline to sideline, linebacker.
yeah,
So it makes me kind of wonder, is Dan Quinn going back to his roots? I want a big D line who can stuff, and then that keeps
yeah.
linebackers clean.
It just reminds me. Now, granted, he's not the guy making the decisions, right? So these are not. Yeah, he can give recommendations. He can talk to the head coach about who guys that he would like to have, all this kinds of stuff. But he's not the guy that makes those moves.
Right.
But this reminds me of like latter day Dan Quinn with the Falcons, where we really needed D line help. Now, granted, they already have rushers, they have edge guys,
Right.
so there is a difference there, but like we needed pass rush, we needed run stopping ability, but we mainly needed pass rush. And the guys we would bring in, we were just like head scratchers of like, we need pass rushing, and you're bringing in a guy like I like this guy, but he's a big run stuffing guy. He's not a pass rush guy, and it's just like
Yep.
we'll see how
Makes
it
you.
all pans out. But
So yeah, exactly. I completely agree. So Dallas to me they're either going to make it to the divisional round or they're not even going to make it to the playoffs, kind of thing. You
yeah,
know, um, so they're kind of like hot and cold. So that just leaves what I'm considering to be the cream of the crop for
mhm.
the NFC. I think if we make it to the championship game, we're going to be playing the Philadelphia Eagles. They have done nothing that suggests that they're going to turn into a pumpkin. Now, they could still very well turn into a pumpkin,
Yeah.
but they still got, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. They lost Miles Sanders, but added running back wise, they added somebody. Oh,
Oh,
they
was
Rashad Penny, and then they traded for DeAndre Swift.
yep.
So they bolstered their running back room in that aspect, especially if those two guys can stay healthy. To go with Boston Scott and whoever else is. There's one name that I'm blanking on. But in the off season, they added Dan Arnold, Catavia Street, Terrell Edmonds, Nicholas Morrow. Don't really know much about him. Justin Evans. So they've added to the safety room. They got the biggest acquisition of all. They added Marcus Mariota to their quarterback room. He's
Man,
really going to push Jalen Hurts.
I mean,
I don't know if y'all can see me, but
all
I'm
the
rolling my eyes here.
all the pieces of knowledge he can
No,
bestow
just
on
bestow.
Jalen
Yeah.
Hurts.
Um, they got Greedy Williams, and like I said before, Rashad Penny. So in the free agent wise, they've done really well as far as adding uh good depth pieces. But
Well,
where they
and there was all the talk about they were going to lose both their cornerbacks, Bradbury and Slay,
and they
and
didn't
then
lose either.
they didn't lose either one of them.
Right.
So they did that. They lost Javon Hargrave. They added Jalen Carter. They still got they added Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith.
Yep.
They became the Philadelphia
Bulldogs.
Bulldogs. But then add that to what was the guy's name? Jordan Davis that
Yes.
they drafted the year last year.
Yeah,
But
and to
I
Kobe
think
Dean.
and Kobe Dean, although Kobe Dean, we'll see. He may turn into a guy like uh, I'm blanking on the name. Our safety, Grant,
Oh yeah,
um, where he didn't. He played like what couple
he
games
yeah he played like
late in the
rotationally, like
season.
late in the season. Yeah,
But then he came on and was a starter in his second year. Maybe that's what Kobe Dean does. My biggest problem with Kobe Dean is that dude is tiny.
yeah.
I mean,
His
tiny.
size is a big deal. But I mean, they lost the CGJ, the Chauncey Gardner
Yep.
Johnson. They
Yep.
lost him. They signed Olamide Zaccheaus to add to their wide receiver room, which he's a guy who can thrive in a third or fourth wide receiver role.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he was asked to do more than that here in Atlanta, and it just didn't work out.
No.
But in a wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 role, I think he's gonna like thrive up there.
Well, he's
Um,
also a guy. I think they may be able to do a better job of getting him like some quick stuff out in space somewhere where he can really like use his speed a little bit better than what we were able to do last year potentially.
right now they lost, like you said, Javon Hargrave and Ndamukong Suh, but they re-signed Fletcher Cox and signed Catavia Street.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they got a really good mix of old savvy veterans with up and coming young talent. It's really what you want. Like
Yeah.
Howie Roseman has done a masterful job. Like right now, the Philadelphia Eagles are the team to beat in the
Oh yeah.
NFC.
Absolutely.
And like they are the like biggest hurdle, biggest obstacle in the way. You've got they seem to have really hit a stride on now. There's another big challenge that we haven't necessarily talked about. They lost both their coordinators. They lost
Mm.
Gannon to Arizona and
Yep.
Steichen to Indianapolis.
Yep.
Now, I think they promoted from within on both accounts, if I'm not mistaken. So it's going to be a big onus on uh, can those guys keep it going?
Yep.
Can those guys take what Jalen Hurts does well and keep him doing it? Do
Yep.
teams finally figure out how to stop the 4th and 1, QB sneak with Jalen Hurts? Do they figure that
Yeah.
out? And so, like, they're the ones that have the target on their backs. So it's going to be really interesting to see if they can keep that success going, or do they have like a major Super Bowl hangover?
Yeah.
Because one team we haven't necessarily talked about, and I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it, but the Los Angeles Rams are still kind of looming. They had like such a major backslide because of injury to Stafford and to Cup and to I think even Donald. If
Yeah.
those three guys come back healthy, like they have the savvy to push.
Yeah,
So
it would be a big turn because like you got to the end of the season, you're wondering was Donald going to retire?
right,
Like he absolutely talked about that. Stafford, is this guy done? Done? Like is he just done? And then you had the head coach was like, he was mulling retirement as well, but he's like, no, I'm coming back. So but yeah, I would not put anything past the Rams. Like that's a good team. They ran into a lot of bad luck last year with some with some injuries, key injuries. It's not just injuries. Everybody deals with injuries, but this
yeah,
was
but
like
no, like I'm
key
talking like
injuries.
key blows, like to your number one wide receiver, to your quarterback,
Yeah,
and like so, yeah. I mean, I don't really. The Rams are too much of a toss up. But if it got down to the end of the season, it would not surprise me if they were in the mix. Um, as um, far as the playoffs and stuff are concerned, I think that is going to pretty much do it. Like,
yeah, yeah. Just in closing, like
yeah,
the NFC, there's it's very top heavy as far as like the the big behemoths.
hmm,
I mean, you got Philadelphia. I think San Francisco can be there. It just they got to figure out what's going on QB wise,
right,
for sure. But what if they can get that figured out? I think they're the 1A to Philadelphia's 1. But past that, I think it's very wide open. I think that you win the division, get into the playoffs. Not saying Super Bowl or bust, but you get into the playoffs. I could see at least one, maybe two wins before probably getting knocked out in like an NFC Championship game. But I would say if we make it to the playoffs, win a wild card game, make it to the divisional round. If we bow out in the divisional round, really no matter who the opponent is, if we bow out in the divisional round, that would be so far and away above my what I think this team can be this year. That I would be super happy with that. I mean, obviously bummed that we lose, but I would be happy with a season where that's what happened.
Yeah, I definitely would not be upset if we bowed out. Like, first of all, if we win the NFC South, awesome.
Yes.
If we win a wild card game or have a good enough record to play in the divisional round, that would also be like awesome. And maybe like a year sooner, so to speak, than I really feel like, especially with the fact that you're coming in with a young QB as the starter. That kind of, whether anybody wants to hear it from me or not, that kind of gives me a little bit of leniency towards the team. As long as they're showing competitiveness and not getting blown out, then yeah, I'm okay with it, but I'll be interested to see obviously how it unfolds. And if we do what we're talking about here, make it, through the NFC or make it to the NFC round of playoffs, I would be ecstatic. I'd be one happy camper.
Yep.
All right, folks. Well, like I said, that's going to do it for us. We should be back next Tuesday or this coming Tuesday, whenever you're watching this, for our regularly scheduled shenanigans. So be ready in the comments, as we will be ready to have some fun and enjoy ourselves.
Be ready to tell us how wrong we are on our opinions on this and just about anything else, really, if you want to.
That's right. So. But as always, y'all can follow me on Twitter. I am at Grim1128. That's GRIMM1128. Jonathan.
At Jonathan M. Holder. Come by, say hi.
And like I said, keep your eye on the channel. We'll be back live on Tuesday, and then we'll have the AFC side the end of next week. As always, Falcons fans, rise up.
Rise up.